Nate Erskine-Smith is with us. He is, as it turns out, Canada's Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. You were supposed to be here about 20 minutes ago, then about 10 minutes ago. You guys got stuck in an Uber. What happened to you today?
We were stuck alongside, I think, many folks here in Montreal in the snow and traffic. Yeah, it was. I come from the east end of Toronto. I avoid downtown Toronto where I can because of the traffic, and I felt like I was in downtown Toronto.
Well, welcome.
Yeah,
nice
thanks.
to have you here.
Good to be
so,
here.
For people who don't know, and it's perhaps worth mentioning as well, this is kind of a new portfolio for you. You've been in this job for like a couple of months, and all of a sudden you're here.
Less than, yeah.
December, right?
Yeah, end of December, and I basically a month and a half trying to get as much done as I can, and part of that is relationship building, and so trying to get around as much as I can and make sure I'm working on behalf of every province.
So let's talk about what you're doing here today. You've met with a provincial housing minister. You got a pretty full slate for the rest of the day. Who else are you meeting with today?
So met off the hop with the provincial housing minister. I'm going to meet next. We're going to race. I don't know if I'm going to get there in time, but going to race to meet the municipal affairs minister. Going to meet the mayor as well before the end of the day. And in the meantime, we've been talking about community housing with a number of folks here.
All right, so let's talk about the reason for you being here and having all these talks with a variety of people in municipal and provincial governments. And this is about the federal government's plan on housing. Why are you here? What are you trying to solidify, if I can use that word?
So two things. One is making sure I want to get a deal done on, it's called the Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund, but really simply, it's about housing enabling infrastructure. It's the wastewater, the water, the sewage, everything that needs to be put in place in order to get housing built and expand density and capacity. We've got I've heard this morning from the construction sector here in Quebec and the home builders, there's a $45 billion gap on housing enabling infrastructure. We've got a smaller fund than that, but it's a $6 billion fund over 10 years, and we got to have a long-term deal with Quebec to make sure we have a partnership there.
So this deal, though, this announcement, rather, has been in place for a while, right? This is just a matter of saying who's going to get what?
Less about who gets what, and more just making sure. So we announced there were dollars in the budget in last April, and so that creates the program. In order to deliver on the program, you need agreements with each province. So we have agreements with. We've announced one with PEI. There are going to be announcements forthcoming with provinces across the country. Every province has its own challenges, though, because one of the conditions is not just that they are adding gentle density everywhere. The other is that there's a freeze on development charges, and we don't see taxes increase on getting housing built. And so BC and Ontario are struggling with that a little bit. I hope we can land a deal with Quebec, and the money flows through the province there.
So we heard the mayor here, I think about a week or two ago, complain about the fact that, when people say, how come you promised to build so much housing, but the housing hasn't actually been built? And she points a finger at Quebec and goes, well, the housing has been built because we're supposed to get money from the province. We didn't get what we were supposed to from the province. Then the province looks to the feds and go, well, wait a sec, we didn't get your money. So that's kind of how it seems to lay out right now, which makes you wonder. It's all well and good to say there's $6 billion in this plan. Where's the money?
Okay, so I would separate it, right? So the Housing Infrastructure Fund, deal's got to be done before the money flows. But what you're talking about, the Housing Accelerator Fund, that was $900 million from the federal government, matched by the province. That money is there. The province is able to distribute it, and ultimately it comes down. I'm sure I'll have these conversations with the mayor this afternoon, but that is up to the province to then flow those dollars in the right way for municipalities.
Okay, so that becomes a provincial issue.
Those dollars are out the door. Like on the federal side, they're out the door.
I had Soraya Martinez Ferrata, who used to be the tourism minister federally, who then made the decision to go ahead and run for mayor of Montreal, which is an election coming up in November. And I asked her when she was here in studio about this whole housing issue, because as I said, housing has become a key part of what's being discussed here going forward, whether it's this same party that wins municipally or whoever ends up being in. I want you to hear what she had to say when I asked about housing and what she thought.
First, we have to recognize the fact that Montreal is the only city in Canada that has seen these constructions of housing decreasing, which doesn't make any sense.
Decreasing, even though the pledge has been to build more housing and the money is there apparently to build more housing, yet we've seen less housing being built. Now, I know that's not a federal responsibility. As you said, the money has been there. Is there something you can do? I mean, is that a question you bring up? It's the money that Canadians are putting into the city, yet the city is apparently not building houses with it.
Yeah, I would take first a step back and look across the country. And you got to know, in my neck of the woods in Ontario, housing starts are down there too. And there are a number of different challenges to this. And there's financing challenges, there's tax challenges. But at the federal level, we're really driving home we got to cut red tape. We got to make sure we speed past some of these administrative delays. We upzone, we get past NIMBYs, and we build gentle density everywhere, and greater density certainly near transit. And so our funds have been contingent in many ways on that outside of Quebec. In Quebec, it has been a little bit different, where there is a unique relationship there. And so there was a deal. We wanted to see ambition on housing, but there was also more flexibility built into that. And I don't know if that's what maybe the mayor will raise with me this afternoon. I'm not sure. The second piece of it is, and I would emphasize, especially based on conversations I was just in, homelessness and encampments and the lack of community housing, frankly, as a structural solution to prevent homelessness in the short and long term. We have delivered dollars here into Montreal. We've delivered dollars into Quebec to address encampments, federal dollars. The money has flowed there too. The second piece of it is community housing, and just making sure we really emphasize that commitment. In 2017, after decades of neglect, the federal government did get back into the game. The Liberal government got back into the game on community housing. We have to double down on those efforts and double non-market housing.
So you mentioned, I'm curious, so you mentioned Quebec. You talk about other provinces where this is happening, but Quebec is a unique situation. Why are we any different than any place else when it comes to this?
Well, so for one, there's a piece of legislation that precludes the federal government doing deals directly with municipalities. So I'll give an example in Toronto. There's a deal through the Housing Accelerator Fund directly with Toronto, and there are milestones that are set specifically with Toronto, and if Toronto is offside those milestones in delivering density, 4 units as of right, greater density on avenues, then there's a potential for those dollars to be clawed back. It's not possible in Quebec to have those same deals directly with municipalities. Frankly, it's tough as a federal minister where you've got over 200 municipalities across this country, and you've got unique deals with each one. So my preference is actually that we have strong provincial governments that are demanding of the municipalities, which are creatures of the province, that they are demanding action. They're demanding that red tape is cut. They're demanding lower development charge burdens, and they're really taking action on their own. Provincial governments have, I think, the most to say and act on housing, frankly. But where we don't see that action, we've got to drive home the point. In Ontario, we see development charges that are way too high. In Ontario, we see, frankly, the biggest gatekeeper in this country is sometimes Doug Ford. And so we do have to make sure the federal government is a serious leader on that front and driving deals directly with municipalities.
It sounds like at the end of the day, you're kind of, out of luck, as they say. You can say, here's the money, here's what we need to see, here are the provisions you have to fulfill, but if you don't do them, that's okay. And in your particular case, I
wouldn't say it's okay. So I think the idea behind the Housing Accelerator Fund is to reward ambition and to push provinces and municipalities to deliver that ambition. And use the Housing Infrastructure Fund as an example. If those funds do have to flow to housing enabling infrastructure, it's not going to be a blank check, right? And that's been part of the negotiation. How do we make sure that these dollars are used specifically to get housing built?
Last question, because we're going to have to wrap up here.
Yeah, sure.
In your particular case, it's unique in the sense you have a pretty short runway here, right?
Too short, yeah.
You've been a minister since December. There's an election probably coming up in a month from now.
Yeah.
Chances are maybe the Liberals win, maybe the Liberals don't. And this is all happening basically, under a microscope as quickly as you can try to make it happen. That's got to be difficult to pull off.
It's tough. Yeah, I think I'm more hopeful now. I think, up against the sort of the slogans and the sort of cheap politics of Pierre Poilievre, we know there's a seriousness and a renewal with Carney that I think it'll be an important and contested election in a serious way, which is, I think, good for Canada. The second thing to say, just in terms of the short runway, I've emphasized at every opportunity, we got to make sure we remove all barriers to get the market supply built. We've got to make sure we double down on commitments to community housing, and we treat fundamentally housing as a home first and investment second. I want to attract dollars to build, but I don't want dollars to compete with first-time home buyers and displace affordability in the existing residential resale space. And so part of this is about delivering on funds like the infrastructure fund, making sure we get dollars at the door on community building. We've got a community center sort of fund on a green inclusive community building fund, getting dollars at the door for things that are already existing. Part of this is about making sure what comes next and setting the stage for what comes next. And that's why this afternoon we were talking with folks here about doubling non-market housing over the next 7 to 10 years. It's why this morning we were talking about tariffs with the construction industry in Quebec. What are your challenges? How is this uncertainty going to undermine the ability to get housing built here in Montreal and here in Quebec? And how do we work collaboratively to make sure we respond to that? And I think this coming election is fundamentally it's going to be addressing the tariffs and making sure we're best placed to respond to Donald Trump. And I think the Liberal government is going to continue to be best placed to do that. Secondly, though, is how do we get more housing built and more community housing built?
Last question. You said you met with the construction group this morning with the industry. What were their big issues with respect to getting housing done here?
The top, I mean, there were many issues. I mean, the uncertainty and the increased costs that we talked about, making sure that we were addressing some of the pain points at CMHC, although they suggested things were getting better. Honestly, the biggest thing, though, was housing enabling infrastructure. We spent most of the time talking about that gap, most of the time talking about the challenges with, some municipalities in Quebec have even placed a moratorium on new housing in areas where they don't have that wastewater. They don't have that housing enabling infrastructure. And so the province needs to act on this. We need to make sure we get a deal with Quebec. And so, my conversations today with the ministers, let's get a deal done. Let's deliver for Quebecers.
I thank you for coming in. I know you have a busy day. I wish you good luck. You're meeting with the mayor.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't ask her about something called Cavendish. I'm just letting
you know.
I'm
more familiar than I would like to be.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming in.